So awkward lies, something that everybody tends to struggle with, from two pros all the way through to the beginner. Really quite difficult when the ball's below your feet, above your feet, you're on a side hill lie. It is difficult. So in this video I'm going to outline some of the reasons why these shots are so difficult and give you some ideas as to how to hit some better shots. So you've hit that lovely drive and the ball's above your feet. Nightmare and quite difficult. Very difficult shot to play, this one, because the ball tends to want to go a little bit to the left because of the way that the club face starts pointing more to the left when the shaft angle changes. Right. I might do a little video on this at some point in the future, something called face play and tilt. You may research it yourself. But the club face can open and close due to shaft angle. So when the ball's above our feet, it tends to be the case that the face starts to point a little bit to the left, and people can start hitting the ball, or the ball certainly starts further left than the player intends. A good player or a better player might be able to counteract that at some point through the swing. I know this is something that I've suffered from in the past, is expecting the ball to go left, but then through the golf swing I've done something to make the ball go right and I've missed the green. So yeah, it depends on the player, but I would certainly expect the ball to start further left than you're expecting, or than what you're wanting it to do. So I'd certainly factor that in. And with all these shots that we're going to explain today, something that is very important is balance. That's probably the number one thing that I see club golfers lose, is their balance through the shot, and it causes problems with connection and strike. Maybe it's hitting the ball off centre, or possibly even interacting with the ground a little bit early. For that reason, I would certainly take a nice wide stance when the ball's above your feet. So we've got our balance. That's the first thing that I would certainly say every player should do when they're in an awkward lie situation, especially when the ball's above your feet. I would certainly want people to have a wider stance so they're more balanced. The reason why this shot can become quite problematic for a lot of amateur golfers is the way that they deliver the club to the ball. And what I mean by that is how the club approaches the ball, what angle it approaches the ball from. A lot of people tend to swing across the ball, and a lot of amateur golfers tend to lose their wrist angles quite early in the downswing. You've got those two things going on with this shot, then it's probably going to be very likely that you're going to hit the ball quite fat, so you're going to hit the ground a little bit before the ball. So for you players that feel as though you're swinging across the ball and maybe he's getting rid of the wrist angles a little bit early, something that can really help you with this shot is to try and feel as though you're retaining wrist angles and a feeling of swinging up the slope or to the right. That's going to really help you make a better connection. So I'll demonstrate that now. So we've got the wide stance, aiming very, very slightly to the right, because I'm expecting the ball to start further left than what I'm expecting. Feeling of retaining wrist angles, swinging to the right. Just as difficult is the downhill lie. Maybe some amateur golfers maybe find this a little bit easier. This shot tends to suit the swinging left and losing wrist angles a little bit earlier than maybe we'd like to see in a normal scenario. When the ball's below your feet, people tend to hit this one a little bit better. It's more so the balance that people really struggle with. So again, I'd like to see people with a wide stance to retain balance. The ball's probably going to start a little bit further to the right than the player expects it to. So it depends on the player really. I mean, a good player will probably override the face play and tilt phenomena that we talked about a little bit earlier. But I like to aim those a little bit further to the left, expecting the ball to start a bit to the right with this shot. And swinging the club, let's say if you're a player that does attack the ball from the inside and retains wrist angles, this shot can be quite problematic. People might sort of find that they maybe hit the ball in the middle a little bit sometimes. I like to feel with this shot that I'm swinging to the left and possibly getting rid of my wrist angles a little bit earlier than what I would when the ball's above my feet. So I'll demonstrate that now. Nice wide stance with balance. Feeling of swinging slightly to the left and losing wrist angles a little bit earlier. It just comes out with a nice little baby cut. Nice strike. The dreaded downhill lie. Not a shot many people like to play, I don't think, myself included. We tend to find that we struggle with getting enough loft on the club to get the ball airborne, so people will then try and put loft on. What I mean by that, people will generally set up, go with the slope, so their spine angle is 90 degrees approximately to the slope, but then during the goal swing they will tend to then lean back and the spine angle will change in the attempt to try and get the ball in the air. The problem is they compromise the strike. People will generally hit the ball quite fat doing that, so it's not a bad idea just to take a little bit more club. So if you're maybe going to hit a 7, maybe it's take an 8 iron, put a little bit more loft on the club. It may take away that temptation to try and get the ball in the air. You'll feel a little bit more confident when you've got some loft. So it's really important again to take a bit of a wider stance for balance. Spine angle is set at 90 degrees to the slope, and we want to feel that through the shot that spine angle is retained and we don't start to lean backwards. We've got to stay leaning forwards, or a sensation of having pressure on the lead foot, on the lower foot, and retain the pressure in that lower foot. We don't want that pressure moving into the back foot. We don't want the spine angle to change at all. So if you can get that right, if you can keep pressure forward and keep the spine angle 90 degrees to the slope, you're going to hit some better shots. Take a little bit more loft as well. So I've got my wider stance for balance. I can feel pressure on my left foot. I'm going to retain that through the shot, and I'm going to retain my spine angle that I've set 90 degrees to the slope. So I find myself in a situation now where I'm still on an uphill lie. It's not that severe, but it still can be quite problematic for people. We're going to find that when we set up, there's going to be that sensation of having pressure in the back foot. People will then tend to try and counter that by leaning too far to the left. That can give us a bit of an angle of attack which is maybe a little steep. We don't really want to be doing that. I like people to, yes again, take that wider stance. They will feel as though there's a little bit more pressure in this back foot or the lower foot, and I don't mind that being retained, that sensation. Not something that we'd do in a normal shot, but I don't mind people retaining the feeling of the pressure in the back foot that they feel at address. We've got the wider stance, and like when the ball, or when we're on a down slope, we've got the spine 90 degrees. That's exactly the same for this shot as well. We want to try and have that 90 degree spine angle and have that retained. We certainly don't want to be leaning further back and tilting the spine, but in the same way we don't really want to lean forward and change the spine angle the other way. We want to try and retain that 90 degree spine angle, retain the feeling of having some pressure in that back foot, taking probably a little bit less loft, because in the same way, or in the opposite way to the ball being on a down slope and the ball coming out a little low, we tend to find that when the ball is on an upslope, we'll tend to hit the ball a little bit higher. So if you're going to hit a 7, maybe take a 6. You'll get a better trajectory, or a trajectory that you're expecting, and certainly the distance that you're expecting. Let's give it a go. So feet wider for balance. The sensation that there's a little bit of pressure on my back foot due to the slope, that's going to be retained. I'm going to feel as though I'm retaining my spine angle. It's not going to change one way or the other, and I've taken a little bit less loft to get the distance that I require. Thanks everybody for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. hope some of these tips have really helped you. Keep tuned in, follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. More videos coming soon.